So I suppose the dominant issue for people working in the news at the moment is probably immigration, and the government obviously have struggled to maybe know how to react to it. But we've seen some of the steps that they're starting to take, which was they deported 23 criminals out of the country, a thing that hasn't happened an awful lot in recent years. Now, some of the people that they've gotten out of this country it can only be a good thing that those are gone.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about the names that we do know of amongst those 23.
Well, I suppose on Monday of last week, the Department of Justice, they chartered an aircraft, and that aircraft took off from Dublin Airport with 23 Romanian nationals on board. Now, each of these 23 individuals have been convicted of serious crimes here in Ireland, whether they be theft, whether they be drug offences, whether they be assault or sexual assault. So the 23, they were serving sentences in prisons around the country. The Garda National Immigration Bureau rounded them up. They were taken to Dublin Airport. They were put on a flight. That flight went back to Bucharest with the 23 on board, and they were handed over to the Romanian authorities.
And do they have to serve their sentence here before they're deported, typically, isn't it?
Well, in the cases of some of the people that we confirmed were on board, they hadn't served out their sentences. And this is something I asked the Department of Justice about yesterday. I sent them an email asking them whether they'd have to serve out the remainder of their sentences in Romania. And I'm just still waiting for a response on that question.
Now, when a case comes to court, a judge can order it, can't they? They can order deportation at the end of the sentence. Is that what happened in these cases? We probably don't know that exactly. Or can the state just decide to deport?
Well, I think what Jim O'Callaghan said was that the freedom of movement is a right that's enshrined under EU law, and
because
it's something.
These are Romanians. It would be
absolutely. Romania joined the EU in 2007, so absolutely, these are EU citizens.
Yeah.
But what Jim O'Callaghan said was that if you have a situation where people come to your country and they break those laws and they represent a danger to the public, then there must be consequences. And the consequences for these 23 was that they were deported back to their home country and they were served with exclusion orders. Now, those exclusion orders mean that none of these people can return to Ireland for a period of 10 years. And these are orders these are moves and orders that aren't taken lightly. We did manage to establish the names of some of the criminals who were on that flight. One of these was a guy called Lucian Varga Mekic. Now, he's 46 years old. He was before the courts in February of last year. The guards gave evidence. They described him as a nomadic criminal, but they also said he was part of a much larger Romanian organized crime gang. Now, I think people have read about these gangs before. They've been heavily covered in the UK media, and they have a modus operandi where a criminal arrives in a country. Within a short period of time, he commits a number of serious offences. Usually, the modus operandi of the gang is they do as much theft as possible within a short period, and they fly out again. And this makes it very hard for the guards to catch them. In Mekic's case, he arrived in Ireland. He took 22,000 euros from one woman. He managed to do this by making withdrawals from her bank account, and quickly that cash was converted into high-end jewellery. He took 6,000 euros worth of goods from Louis Vuitton on Grafton Street, took 14,000 euros worth of goods from Andrew Weir and Sons. So that's a significant amount of money that went back to this criminal gang. And then the idea is that he leaves again. And like the guard said, it's very hard to catch somebody who's acting like that. And also it's complicated by the fact that these guys changed their names.
And the passports and all. And we did a story not so long ago with Ken Foy about the ATM skimmers where they fly in, they do these and they're gone and they come back then a few months later in a different passport.
It's very, very similar kind of offences. In Mekic's case, he was given a 4-year sentence. So he was one of the guys on the flight. And I don't think anybody, regardless of where you stand on the political spectrum, is going to be mourning his departure from this country.
And certainly it's impossible to believe anybody would mourn the departure of Vadim Vest. Feste maybe is how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
I mean, his crimes are abhorrent by any normal standard.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a guy who, back in November of 2021, he carried out an aggravated sexual assault. There was a woman in her 50s. She was walking her dog in St. Coleman's Park in Cork. It was 5 or 6 p.m. in the evening. It was dark, but this was a park she knew well, that she walked the dog in regularly, and she felt completely safe, which she was right to do. Unfortunately for her, Fadim Vesta was was lying in wait. He grabbed her, dragged her into some bushes, gagged her with his hat, and sexually assaulted her. Now, this woman, bravely, she managed to fight back. She managed to scrape his face, his neck with her fingernails, and she screamed for help. And it was 2 Polish nationals who were out for a jog. They heard her screams. They came and they grabbed Fadim Vesta. The guards were called and he was arrested. Now, what transpired subsequently about Vesta was he is a convicted child rapist.
Yeah.
He was sentenced to 3 years in prison for the rape of a 14-year-old girl. Now, that 14-year-old girl was 6 years younger than him at the time the rape took place. They were in a relationship, but basically the circumstance of the rape outlined in the court were that he had forced himself on this 14-year-old. So it was rape. She made a complaint. He did 3 years for that. He was released from prison in December 2021. And within 18 days, he had made his way from Eastern Europe to Ireland.
Now, is there, obviously we have, what people call the sex offenders register, which is probably not really a great term for it in Ireland, where if somebody, is committed a sex offence and they tend to have to register the new address if they move around in Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
Presumably, this guy doesn't have to register when he comes, does he? Or make the authorities aware of his criminal history? Well,
I assume that's based on the country where the offence takes place, and there's different legislation in different countries, so it's difficult to give a yes or no answer to that one. But suffice it to say that he was living in Ireland and he carried out this attack on a woman in her 50s who had every right to feel safe. So again, he's one of the guys on the plane, and I don't think anybody's going to feel sorry about that.
I mean, there was another guy as well who'd been convicted of another very serious assault who was also deported with him. Yeah,
this was a guy called Alexander Udrea. He was a 35-year-old. He was working as a porter in a Dublin hotel. January 6th of 2019, he's at a Christmas party with a female colleague. After the party's over, they make their way back to her apartment, where he subsequently he sexually assaults her and is convicted of oral rape and sexual assault. The victim in that case was somebody who had moved from a small town in the countryside. She wasn't named. She had moved up to Dublin, but was carefree and self-confident, was the way she described herself. She told the court that when she left Dublin and went back home, she was broken.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of people that were on that plane last week.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have the cost of it as well.
We do. And compare it to the cost that we've heard about in previous deportations. This one was not significant. Yeah. The Department of Justice put out a statement. They said they have a partnership now with a company called Air Partners Limited, and that the cost of this one-way flight to Romania was €69,000.
Right.
Now, if you compare that to the cost of keeping these 23 people in Irish prisons for the next year, the average cost of keeping a criminal in prison is in between 70 and 80,000 euros the last time that we got those figures. Yeah. Now, it's probably gone up since then.
Probably.
So you're looking at a cost to keep these 23 behind bars of 1.4 million euros. So the economics of it makes sense. Yeah. But also, we have a prison system that is incredibly overcrowded. Yesterday, there was 460 people sleeping on mattresses across the prisons. So it makes sense to send guys like this.
Oh, totally. I mean, of course, we all, as well, better than I do, there's people getting convicted of, obviously not hugely serious offences, but serious offences. And they get 3 to 6 months in custody. They walk in the door and walk straight out because there's just no space for them. It is just absolutely standard practice now at this stage. And some of these are violent offences, maybe not, obviously not murders or anything on that scale, but people literally walk in the door, sign something and go straight out.
I think the difficulty for the Irish Prison Service in all of this is that as overcrowding reared its head, and when COVID was happening, there was a cohort of prisoners who were released because they were seen as people who would not offend again. It's very difficult to keep doing that because each time you release a cohort of prisoners, you go further up that chain. So if there is an alternative and you can free up spaces in the manner in which was done last week, that can only be described as a good thing.
So do we know how many people are being deported under these circumstances?
Well, we do, and it's not a lot.
Yeah.
So far this year, there's been 45 people deported in these circumstances. 22 people were deported on commercial flights. This was the first time this year that there was a group deportation on a flight like this. And I suppose what was significant about the statement Jim O'Callaghan put out was the fact that he said they do have this partnership now. It was done at a very reasonable cost.
Yeah.
It freed up jail spaces and has saved the state quite an amount of money. Now, I suppose the question people will come back to is what happens to the rest of the sentences? And I suppose that's something we'll have to look at when the Department of Justice get back to us.
It may well be the case that some people agree to deportation and,
absolutely,
maybe in the knowledge that they might serve a little less time. I mean, I don't know. Again, I don't think most people would particularly object to that if it means they're out of the country forever. Is it easier to deport somebody who's an EU citizen, I wonder, than because these people, obviously the big issue for immigration has been to do with asylum seekers. I mean, none of these people are asylum seekers. You would imagine that it's easier to deport somebody within the EU because they can't really.
Well, I don't think deportation and the system that we have set up in this country, I don't think it's easy to deport anybody who is against their own deportation because there is a process that allows people to appeal and appeal and appeal and appeal. And we've both covered cases where offences have been committed by people who have been issued with deportation orders, and yet 2 and 3 years later, they're still in the country. And we have seen these cases, and then people have asked the question, why was that person still in the country to commit this offence if there's a deportation order? And that's probably something that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, and I mean, some of the issues will be, and we had a case recently of a guy saying it wasn't safe to be deported to the US because it was a dangerous country. But certainly people that are seeking asylum, the basis of their claim is it's not safe for them to come back. So it becomes more complex to deport them.
It does. And there's another issue in all of this that we can't conflate the issue of people who come here from another country and commit an offence with issues of asylum seekers and immigration. Because, I mean, like I say, we have both covered cases. Some of the worst offences that we have covered in this country have been committed by Irish people, whether those be offences that involve children, whether they be drug offences. I mean, the biggest drug gang in this country is currently immigrated over to Dubai. And yet there does seem to be this hysteria around if a foreign person commits an offence here, there's this effort to portray it as being all foreign people. There's a danger to conflating crime and immigration.
There is.
And I mean, a criminal is a criminal. An immigrant is an immigrant. There's a big difference.
Yeah, and I think just Googling it here quickly, there's 42,000 people of Romanian nationality in Ireland. I mean, these are 23 out of that 42,000.
It's a tiny percentage.
However, I mean, whatever your political stance is, and people are entitled to have a range of political views, there is no logical reason why we wouldn't want to deport people that commit heinous crimes of this nature. There is no logical reason to try and keep them, is there? Do you think there's a political will to change that stance?
Well, I mean, the figures, they are out that, 45 people deported this year. It seems a very, very small amount in these circumstances. It does seem a small amount, but that number is up significantly on last year, and that's up significantly on the year before. And the thing is that 45 being deported, but there's actually 99 deportation orders under the Free Movement Directive. So there's potentially another 44 who could be deported this year. Is there a political will? I think there is. I think there has been a toughening stance by the government. I think Jim O'Callaghan has been much tougher when it comes to areas concerning immigration. He says there's a system and that we need to abide by the rules of that system. And it's hard to argue with that.
It is hard to argue. Okay, well, thanks, Pat. No doubt we'll be coming back to immigration and crime at a further point. Of that we can be sure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.